Marcus Holloway leaned back in his leather office chair, the sprawling city skyline reflecting off the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office. His hands were steepled together, his expression unreadable as he skimmed through the latest batch of complaints. The words blurred together, but their meaning was clear. Something was deeply wrong at Holloway Realty. For years, Marcus had prided himself on building an empire that stood for opportunity and integrity. As one of the few black CEOs in the real estate industry, he knew firsthand the struggles that came with breaking barriers, but he had always believed that success was the best answer to discrimination. He had envisioned his company as a place where talent thrived regardless of race, gender, or background. But these reports told a different story, one that filled him with a growing sense of unease. The complaints had started as a trickle, a few disgruntled customers here and there, but over the past 6 months, the volume had grown into a flood. There were accusations of racial bias in how clients were treated, reports of employees undermining their colleagues, and whispers of an exclusive, elitist culture festering within his own walls. One particular email stood out. "I came in looking to buy my first home, but your employees barely acknowledged me. They dismissed my questions, acted like I couldn't afford anything, and only started treating me with respect when they saw my bank statement. It was humiliating. Is this the kind of company you run?" Marcus clenched his jaw. This wasn't just a customer's bad experience. It was a stain on everything he had worked for. He glanced at another report from an internal source claiming that black and minority employees were treated as second-class citizens within his own company. Jason Whitmore, one of the top sales executives, was repeatedly named in these complaints. Customers described him as dismissive, arrogant, and openly condescending to those he deemed unworthy of his time. Employees reported that he routinely ignored or mocked minority coworkers, and yet his sales numbers kept him untouchable. Marcus had seen men like Jason before, smooth, charming when necessary, but ruthless in maintaining their power. Firing someone like that without cause would send the wrong message. No, if Marcus was going to fix this, he needed proof. He couldn't rely on reports alone. He had to see it for himself. The idea formed in his mind like a slow-burning ember. He would go undercover, step into the very halls of his company as an unknown face, and see how deep the rot went. The next morning, Marcus stood in front of his bathroom mirror, studying his reflection. He was used to commanding respect the moment he walked into a room. His tailored suits, his polished demeanor, his reputation as a shrewd businessman all spoke for him before he even opened his mouth. But today, he had to be someone else. He reached for a pair of thick-framed glasses, slipping them onto his face. His usual sharp haircut was now slightly disheveled, a little longer on the sides. Instead of his usual designer suits, he wore a simple button-down shirt and khakis, nothing that would attract attention. He practiced his new identity in his head. Malcolm Evans, a mid-level employee transferring in from another branch, eager to learn the ropes. No one at the office knew his face well enough to recognize him immediately. Marcus had always operated from the top, handling acquisitions, expansions, and high-level negotiations. The day-to-day office culture had been left in the hands of his regional managers, something he now regretted deeply. There was only one person in on the plan, his trusted assistant, Vanessa Reynolds. She had been with him for years and was one of the few people he knew he could trust completely. "Are you sure about this?" Vanessa asked as he entered the parking garage. She leaned against his sleek black Mercedes, arms crossed, skepticism written all over her face. "This is insane, Marcus. You have security teams, private investigators. You don't have to do this yourself." Marcus shook his head. "No investigator is going to experience what real employees and customers do. I need to feel it firsthand." She sighed, handing him a cheap, plastic employee ID badge with his fake name printed on it. "At least call me if something goes wrong. And Marcus," she hesitated, "what if you find out things are worse than you expected?" He slipped the badge into his pocket. "Then I'll burn the whole damn place down and rebuild it from the ground up." Marcus parked his car several blocks away from the Holloway Realty branch office, walking the remaining distance just like any other employee would. Gone were the double takes and deferential nods he was accustomed to in corporate settings. No one acknowledged him. As he stepped into the office lobby, the receptionist barely glanced up. "Name?" she asked, still focused on her phone. "Malcolm Evans." She typed lazily, chewing gum as she scanned the system. "Oh, the new guy from the downtown office?" He nodded. She exhaled sharply, pointing toward the back. "Talk to Jason. He handles new transfers. But don't expect much. He hates dealing with newbies." Marcus's stomach tightened, but he forced a polite smile. "Thanks." He made his way toward the main floor, where agents were bustling between desks, taking calls and handling paperwork. The office was sleek, modern, and buzzing with the kind of energy that came with big money deals. It didn't take long to spot Jason Whitmore. He was standing near the glass-walled conference room, laughing with a few colleagues. Tall, blonde, and dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, Jason looked every bit the part of a successful salesman. But there was an air of arrogance in the way he carried himself, a smirk that never quite left his face. Marcus approached, keeping his posture neutral. "Excuse me, Jason? I'm Malcolm, the new transfer." Jason barely spared him a glance. "Right? New guy." He took a sip of his coffee. "You trained in luxury real estate before?" "I have experience," Marcus replied evenly. Jason let out a dry chuckle. "Experience doesn't mean shit if you don't know how to close deals. And around here, we don't waste time on people who can't bring in real clients." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I'm here to learn how things work at this office." Jason scoffed. "Then here's your first lesson. Don't waste my time." He waved over another employee. "Sarah, get this guy a desk or whatever. Just keep him out of my way." The dismissiveness was immediate and cutting. Marcus followed Sarah through the office, keeping his expression blank. But inside, he could feel the fire igniting. This was exactly why he was here. The morning air inside the office was thick with the aroma of fresh coffee and expensive cologne. Phones rang in a rhythmic symphony, punctuated by the occasional laughter of agents closing high-stakes deals. Marcus sat at his assigned desk, a small, unassuming corner that had clearly been repurposed from a storage space. A dented filing cabinet stood beside him, its drawers stuck slightly ajar. The chair wobbled if he leaned too far to the left. No one had even given him a proper tour of the office. The unspoken message was clear: you don't belong here. Marcus had been in high-pressure environments before, boardrooms where billion-dollar deals were made, meetings where executives hung on his every word. But today, as Malcolm Evans, he was just another nameless, faceless employee. And the way people treated him made that painfully obvious. For the first hour, Marcus observed the office dynamics. The agents who dominated the space were almost all white, dressed in sharp suits that probably cost more than the average person's rent. They spoke in confident, rapid-fire exchanges about commissions, high-value clients, and weekend golf outings. When Marcus tried to join a conversation, his presence was met with immediate discomfort. "You need something?" one of the senior agents, Brett, asked, barely looking up from his laptop. Marcus smiled politely, "Just getting a feel for how things work here. I wanted to ask." Brett held up a finger, silencing him mid-sentence. He turned to Jason Whitmore, who was sipping his overpriced coffee like he owned the room. "Hey, Jason, you see the Mercedes S-Class that pulled up this morning? Client from uptown. Wants a penthouse with full skyline views." Jason chuckled. "Another easy commission. Love these guys. They know what they want. They don't waste your time. And," his voice lowered slightly, "most importantly, they can actually afford what they're asking for." Brett smirked. "Unlike some of the people we get in here." Marcus didn't miss the undertone. He had heard it a million times before. "People like us." He cleared his throat, trying again. "What's the usual process for first-time homebuyers who might not have a high budget?" Jason turned to him, exhaling as if exhausted. "Listen, man, first rule in this business? You go after real clients, not the ones wasting your time. If they don't have money, they don't belong here." Marcus kept his expression neutral, though inside, His blood was starting to simmer. He knew exactly how many hardworking people were shut out of the real estate market simply because of bias. Instead of pushing back, he nodded. "Got it." Jason grinned. "Good. Maybe you'll actually last longer than the other guys." Marcus didn't need to ask what he meant by the other guys. As the morning dragged on, Marcus watched as customers entered the office. The differences in how they were treated were stark. A well-dressed white couple stepped through the glass doors, and within seconds, 3 different agents were vying for their attention. "Good afternoon, sir, ma'am. Looking for something in luxury properties?" One of them asked enthusiastically. "Can I get you an espresso while we discuss options?" Another chimed in. The couple was escorted to the premium conference room, where they were treated like royalty. Then, not even 10 minutes later, a black woman walked in with her teenage son. She wore a neat but modest outfit, her posture carrying a quiet determination. No one moved. Marcus saw the receptionist glance at the woman, then immediately returned to her phone. The woman hesitated, then approached the front desk. "Hi, I'm looking for an agent," she said, her voice polite but firm. "I'd like to discuss buying my first home." The receptionist barely looked up. "Do you have an appointment?" The woman frowned. "No, I was hoping someone could assist me." A long pause. The receptionist sighed dramatically before finally calling out, "Hey, someone free?" A young agent, barely out of training, was reluctantly pushed forward. I can help," he muttered. Marcus's jaw clenched as he watched the woman's face flicker with disappointment. She knew, just like Marcus did, that she wasn't being given the same level of respect as the couple before her. Minutes later, when the woman and her son left, Jason leaned over to Brett and muttered, "She probably just wanted to see how much she couldn't afford." Brett chuckled. "They always do." Marcus had seen enough. Later that afternoon, Marcus was assigned to shadow one of the mid-level agents, a woman named Lisa who had clearly drawn the short straw. She walked him through the company's internal software and listing system, speaking in a rushed, clipped tone as if teaching him was a burden. Eventually, he asked her, "So, what's the deal with Jason? Seems like he runs the place." Lisa sighed, lowering her voice. "He brings in the biggest clients, and he's been here forever. Management turns a blind eye to his." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Opinions." Marcus arched an eyebrow. "And you're okay with that?" Lisa hesitated again, glancing around. "Look, I just keep my head down and do my job. If you want to last here, you should too." That was the problem, wasn't it? People who saw what was happening but didn't speak up. People who let men like Jason dictate the culture. As Lisa walked away, Jason strolled by, flashing Marcus a smirk. "Hey, new guy. I hear you're asking a lot of questions." Marcus smiled. "Just trying to learn." Jason clapped a hand on his shoulder, lowering his voice. "Word of advice? Some people fit in here, some don't. Figure out which one you are." Marcus held Jason's gaze for a long moment. "Oh, I already have." By the time noon rolled around, Marcus had seen more than enough. He had witnessed discrimination in business before. It was nothing new. But seeing it unfold so blatantly, within a company he owned, was something else entirely. It was no longer just a matter of unspoken bias. It was arrogance. It was entitlement. And above all, it was the absolute certainty that no one would ever hold them accountable. And Jason was at the heart of it all. Jason strutted through the office like he owned the place, his expensive shoes clicking against the polished marble floor. He was one of those men who exuded confidence not because he was particularly talented, but because no one had ever told him he wasn't. Marcus had spent the morning shadowing different agents, trying to get a sense of how the company operated. But every time he tried to ask questions, Jason found a way to dismiss him. "Hey, new guy, we don't need questions. We need results," Jason said, leaning back in his chair. "You do know how to get results, right?" Marcus simply nodded, biting back his response. A few moments later, he overheard Jason muttering to one of his buddies, "I don't even know why they keep hiring these types. They don't last." Marcus's jaw tightened. These types. He had heard that phrase too many times before. At 1 p.m., the entire team gathered in the conference room for a strategy session. It was supposed to be a brainstorming meeting, an opportunity for agents to share ideas on attracting new clients. Marcus sat quietly at the end of the table, observing. It was clear that only a select few were encouraged to contribute. Every time a younger, less experienced agent tried to speak, Jason would cut them off or make a joke at their expense. The others laughed, eager to stay on his good side. Finally, Marcus decided to test the waters. He leaned forward and said, "Have you ever considered reaching out to first-time homebuyers in underrepresented communities? There's a growing market." Jason let out a sharp, mocking laugh, cutting him off. "First-time homebuyers?" Jason repeated, shaking his head. "Yeah. Let's waste our time selling to people who can barely afford a down payment." The room filled with quiet chuckles. Marcus kept his expression neutral, but inside he was seething. Jason wasn't just rude, he was actively promoting discrimination. And what was worse, no one in the room challenged him. As the meeting ended, Marcus felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to see Sarah, one of the newer agents. She looked around nervously before whispering, "Hey, I just wanted to say I think your idea was actually really smart." Marcus studied her for a moment. She seemed genuine. "If you think that, why didn't you say something?" he asked. She shifted uncomfortably. "Because no one else did. And, well, Jason basically runs things here." Marcus nodded slowly. He understood. She wasn't like Jason or the others, but she was afraid. That was the problem. Good people staying silent while bad people thrived. By late afternoon, Marcus had been pushed to his limit. He was at his desk, looking through listings, when Jason called out, "Hey, new guy!" Marcus turned around. "Be a team player, yeah? Grab us some coffee," Jason said, smirking. "Cream, no sugar for me. Make sure it's hot." Marcus stared at him. "Excuse me?" Jason leaned back, amused. "Oh, come on, man. We all do our part. You want to be useful around here, right?" Around the office, a few agents smirked. No one spoke up. Marcus exhaled slowly. He wasn't a prideful man, but this was more than just an insult. This was a test. He looked Jason straight in the eye and said, "If you want coffee, get it yourself." Jason let out a sharp laugh, shaking his head. "Whoa, look at this guy. All right. No need to get sensitive." Then he added, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Man, these guys really don't know their place, do they?" The room fell into an awkward silence. A few people chuckled nervously. Others looked away. Marcus locked eyes with Jason. For a brief moment, he considered revealing himself right then and there, telling Jason exactly who he was. But no, not yet. Not until tomorrow. Jason and the others had no idea that the man they had been mocking, dismissing, and looking down on was their boss. And by the end of the next day, most of them wouldn't have a job. The morning sun streamed through the tall glass windows of the real estate office, casting golden rays over the sleek conference table. It was Friday, the end of the workweek, the day of the weekly sales meeting. Today, however, would be different. Marcus Holloway stood in front of the mirror in his penthouse suite, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored navy blue suit. Gone was the modest outfit of the new trainee. Today, he was every inch the CEO. It was time to set things right. The moment Marcus stepped into the office, heads turned. The receptionist, who had barely acknowledged him before, sat up straighter, eyes widening. Agents who had ignored or mocked him suddenly took notice. And Jason was sitting at the head of the conference table, laughing at something one of his colleagues had said. When he saw Marcus, he barely spared him a glance before smirking. Well, you clean up nice, new guy," Jason drawled. "You finally ditched that discount suit?" Marcus ignored the comment and walked straight to the front of the room. His presence alone was commanding. The room grew quieter as the agents noticed that he wasn't heading for a seat at the back. He was walking toward the podium. Jason frowned. What the hell are you doing?" Marcus turned to face the room, his deep voice cutting through the silence. "Good morning, everyone," he said. "Before we begin, I'd like to introduce myself properly." He unbuttoned his suit jacket, let the weight of his words settle. "My name is Marcus Holloway," he continued, scanning the room, "and I am the CEO of this company." Silence. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Jason's smirk vanished. The color drained from his face. The room erupted into whispers and gasps. "Wait! What?" someone muttered. "The CEO?" Another agent breathed, eyes wide. Jason let out a nervous laugh. "Okay, this is a joke, right?" Marcus turned his gaze to him. "Does it look like I'm joking?" Jason's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked around for support, but his colleagues, the very people who had laughed at his jokes, who had followed his lead in belittling Marcus, were now staring at him with a mixture of fear and disbelief. They were realizing the truth. They had mocked the man who signed their paychecks. Marcus took a slow breath before speaking again, his tone controlled but firm. "I spent this week undercover to see how this company truly operates. I wanted to understand the culture we've built here, and what I saw was unacceptable." He turned toward Jason. "I saw arrogance, disrespect, a complete lack of professionalism. And worst of all, I saw talented people being shut down simply because they didn't fit your narrow idea of success." Jason shifted in his seat, his confident demeanor crumbling. I was just joking, man. You know how it is." Marcus cut him off. "No, Jason. I know exactly how it is. And that's why I'm making changes." Jason froze. Marcus pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. "This," he said, tapping the cover, "is a list of employees who will no longer be working here after today." Jason's face turned pale. "No way, man," he sputtered, his voice rising in panic. "You can't just fire people like that." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Can't I? Because last I checked, I own this company." Jason's hands curled into fists. "This is insane. Just because we made a few jokes." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "You didn't just make jokes. You belittled colleagues. You dismissed ideas that could have helped this company grow. You created a hostile work environment. And you thought no one would ever hold you accountable." The room was deadly silent. Then Marcus slid a termination letter across the table. "Jason, you're fired." Jason shot up from his seat. "This is bullshit. I've been here for years." Marcus remained unfazed. "And in those years, you've proven that you value your own ego more than this company's success." Security appeared at the door. Jason looked around wildly, but no one defended him. Even his so-called friends stayed quiet. With a furious glare, he grabbed his things and stormed out. Marcus turned back to the room. Everyone looked shaken. "Let me be clear," he said. "This company will no longer tolerate toxicity and discrimination. If you want to be here, you will treat your colleagues with respect. You will be part of a team that values talent over privilege." He let his words settle before adding, "And if that's a problem, you're free to leave." No one moved. No one spoke. But in the corner of the room, Sarah, the one employee who had supported him, met his gaze and smiled. Marcus exhaled. This was just the beginning. The echoes of Jason's angry footsteps had barely faded before Marcus turned back to the stunned employees. The air in the conference room was thick with tension, a mix of anxiety and uncertainty lingering in every hesitant glance. But Marcus wasn't finished. He took a deep breath and let his gaze sweep across the room. "Now," he said, his voice firm but calm, "let's talk about the future of this company." Marcus placed a sleek black folder on the table. "This," he said, tapping its surface, "contains everything I saw and heard this past week. Audio recordings, security footage, first-hand accounts." Murmurs rippled through the room. Some employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others, especially those who had kept their heads down during Jason's reign, leaned in, eager to hear what came next. Marcus flipped open the folder and pulled out a few pages. "I heard conversations where employees were ridiculed for their backgrounds. I watched as new ideas were dismissed, not because they lacked merit, but because the person suggesting them didn't fit in." He paused. I saw promising talent being wasted. His words hung heavy in the air. One man, sitting near the back, raised his hand hesitantly. Sir, some of us, didn't agree with what was happening, but Marcus gave him a steady look. But you stayed silent. The man looked down. Marcus sighed. I understand that speaking up isn't easy, but that culture ends today. He pulled out a list and read off several names. These individuals will not be returning to work next week, he said plainly. They have fostered a toxic work environment, hindered growth, and damaged this company's reputation. A collective inhalation swept through the room. Some names were expected. Others, including a few employees who had laughed along but never directly participated, were met with gasps. Marcus continued, his tone unwavering. If you think you can contribute to this company without belittling others, without hoarding opportunities, and without playing power games, then you are welcome to stay. If not, you know where the door is. He let that sink in. No one moved. No one left. That was a start. Marcus clasped his hands together. Now, let's talk about moving forward. He turned to the HR director, a middle-aged woman who had been visibly uneasy throughout the meeting. Starting today, we're implementing new anti-discrimination policies and mandatory workplace culture training. I expect full compliance. She nodded quickly, eager to prove herself. He then looked toward the marketing team. This company was built to serve diverse communities. That means we need employees who reflect that mission. Moving forward, recruitment efforts will prioritize inclusivity and merit. He turned to the entire room. And I will personally oversee the next round of hires. The shift in atmosphere was palpable. People were still nervous, but there was something else now. Hope, a chance for something better. After the meeting ended, employees slowly trickled out, whispering among themselves. Some still seemed shell-shocked. Others looked inspired. But Marcus had one more conversation to have. He walked up to Sarah, the one employee who had treated him with dignity from the start. Sarah, he said warmly. She turned, her face uncertain. Mr. Holloway? You were one of the few people who showed professionalism and kindness when I was just the new guy. That didn't go unnoticed. Sarah blushed. I just did what I thought was right. Marcus smiled. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need. He reached into his folder and pulled out a crisp white envelope. Sarah hesitated before taking it. When she opened it, her eyes widened. This is a promotion, she whispered. Vice President of Sales, Marcus confirmed. I need someone who understands the value of respect and integrity in leadership. Tears welled in her eyes. Do you accept? Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Marcus extended a hand, and she shook it, firm, grateful. As Marcus left the office that day, he felt something shift within him. This wasn't just about firing toxic employees. It was about rebuilding something better. Something that truly reflected the values he had envisioned when he founded this company. And as he stepped into the elevator, he knew this was only the beginning.